Hi, it's Joseph here again with another video. And today I'm going to be doing my version of Black Friday Record Store Day, how I experienced it. And it's going to be a rather unusual Black Friday Record Store Day video because I did not score or pick up any of the official releases from Black Friday. I did have my eye on a couple items, but my local record store, who does participate in Black Friday Record Store Day, gets very few records of the releases from Record Store Day. In fact, they probably get maybe at the most 20 or 30 items total. And so I do put in the specific titles that I'm interested, and many times they get them. Most of the time it's jazz related titles, and they do get them. But this time they didn't get anything that I was interested in, so I just went to record store to the record store day and just digged into the crate, see what I could find, because they did have a sale. And I did find some interesting items, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. One thing that's very unusual about my local shop is they don't have any categories other than everything's mixed together. Classic rock, jazz, blues, which they have very little of jazz or blues. Mostly it's classic rock. So you really have to dig to find stuff that's outside of classic rock category. So I was digging, and lo and behold, I found this one. Kenny Barron, Lucifer. I had never heard of this particular album. It's on the Muse Records label, and it's very unusual for the jazz pianist Kenny Barron in the fact that this is actually a funk-orientated album with him on electric piano, some acoustic piano. He's also has the great James Spalding on alto saxophone and bass flute, Charles Sullivan on trumpet, who's very underrated, Carlos Alomar on electric guitar, Chris White electric bass, and Billy Hart on drums. And the first cut, Spirits, is just blazing funk, which you'd be surprised to hear from Kenny Barron, who one always thinks is a mainstream pianist. But this is really an outstanding album. I later saw in Discogs that it's a pretty pricey and rare album, and I scored it for $5, so can't go wrong with that. And once again, it's on the Muse label. It's a white promo. So this was a major score. I've been really enjoying listening to this one for a couple of days. Another item that I scored on Record Store Day at my local shop was from one of my favorite bands, Asleep at the Wheel, Collision Course. This is, I believe, their last album they did for Capitol Records, Collision Course, and this was with really one of the best lineups of the band. It included, of course, Ray Benson, the leader, Chris O'Connell on vocals, and it's really an outstanding album. It's got a great version of 1 O'Clock Jump, the Count Basie classic, and perhaps one of my favorite songs by Asleep at the Wheel is Texas, Me and You. And my last video, I was speaking about Doug Sahm and the whole Texas mystique. And this is another one that really has always been with me in a great Texas vibe. In California, I saw Asleep at the Wheel probably maybe about 20 or 30 times. I would go down to the Palomino in North Hollywood, the famous country club, and see them every time they were in town. And they were just always on fire, especially the late 70s and the early 80s. Ray, no matter what the lineup was just outstanding. I remember one particular band he had was Marianne Price on vocal. Chris O'Connell was still on board at that time, and they were just an amazing band to hear live. So much energy, and I hear they're still around today. In fact, they just did a PBS special about a week or two ago, and I saw a clip of it, and the band still sounds great. They're still touring today, so I was really glad to pick up this. This, like I say, is the last album they did for Capitol Records, Asleep at the Wheel, Collision Course. Now this was unheard. I had never heard of this particular album. This is called Marianne Siegel with Silver Jade, Fly on Stranger Wings. And lately I've been into a British folk rock. I've been interested in British folk rock, like Fairport Convention, Pentangle, also the prog rock, folk rock of Renaissance with the female vocals of Sandy Denny, Annie Hansen. And in this case, it's, like I say, a vocalist I never heard of, Marianne Siegel, but she sounds a lot like Sandy Denny. And actually on this album, it's Peter Sears is on bass, who would later go on to the Jefferson Starship. But this is a really pleasant album, and it's a nice discovery. So this was another great find there on Record Store Day. On Saturday, the day after Black Friday, I went to a local pop-up. The great people at Soundstream Records, they do pop-ups here in the Rio Grande Valley. And I try to visit them every time they have a pop-up, because they always have great items, great people. And I found two great albums. The first one is Cal Jader, Soul Sauce. And I've been on the lookout for this one for some time. This is probably, in my opinion, one of Cal's best albums on Verve. He has Donald Byrd and Kenny Burrell on an outstanding version of Afro Blue that is arranged by the late, great Gary McFarlane. And it's great. Actually, those two, Kenny Burrell and Donald Byrd, only appear on that one track. Because other than that, the group is primarily focused on Cal's working group, which includes Lonnie Hewitt, the late great Lonnie Hewitt on piano, John Hilliard on bass, Johnny Ray on drums, and the great conga player Armando Peraza with Willie Bobo on Soul Sauce. And in fact, the album opens up with Soul Sauce, Wachiwara, and it's a remake. He did, of course, that was a big hit on Fantasy and would also become a big hit on Verve. It was always one of Cal's go-to tunes that always got the crowd moving. And this is just a really wonderful album. Every tune on it is great. Somewhere in the Night is that beautiful bolero sound that they would play on Richard Leos's jazz radio show on the old KBCA radio in Los Angeles. And Tanya, Spring is Here. Just really an outstanding album. This is a mono version, in very clean condition. So this was really a great find I enjoyed at the pop-up. And the other one I did at the show, bought, was, of course, the classic, Miles Davis, Jack Johnson. And I used to have this album in my original collection, and to me, it's one of Miles' best on the electric, when he went to Electric Fusion, because he's got John McLaughlin on guitar, Steve Grossman saxophone, Billy Cobham on drums, and a young Michael Henderson on bass. And this is just like a funk fest at times. John McLaughlin comes out smoking, Michael Henderson is funky, Billy Cobham, and in fact, on the end of side one, I believe it's called Right Off, they get into a funk groove that is right there with anything that's Sly and the Family Stone. They're just super funky, and Miles is blowing some great trumpet throughout. And special shout out to John McLaughlin, because he's just on fire throughout this whole album. And so this is a big time score that I did at the pop-up. Glad I have it. And those were my finds for Black Friday. No Record Store Day releases at this time. Maybe I'll keep my eye open on Discogs. There was a couple items I had my eyes on. The Skip James release, the Gary Sharon on Impulse, Jefferson Airplane at Monterey. Those were kind of some of the items I had my eyes on. Who knows, maybe I'll get them, maybe I won't. But for now, I'm very happy with the scores that I did for the weekend, and hope you found some good releases too, whether they're Record Store Day releases or not, because they're out there. So that's all for now. Like, subscribe, and talk to you soon.